January 2019 Lunch and Learn event. And we have a very, very exciting topic today, which is how to build chatbots. What to do, what not to do, how can they work for your business. So Rockhampton Regional Council is very committed to supporting our business owners, entrepreneurs, startups, small to medium enterprises. And one of the ways in which we demonstrate this commitment is by holding these lunch and learns. Now this year we really want to expand our focus and focus on how you can use technology to execute basic business principles across any business. And so we are extremely excited about kicking off with this topic, and I think this is one of the best topics we've had so far. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you a very experienced developer. So what we do, as you would know, is we get very experienced speakers in to hold these lunch and learns, experts in their field, and really Stuart Varrall is one of those people today. He's a very experienced developer. He studied entrepreneurship in the US, as you would have read in the marketing. And I know you all read in the marketing everything about Stuart, so I don't want to repeat what you already know. I want to give you some quirky facts about Stuart. So Stuart and his family moved to Australia from the UK a couple of years ago. Stuart enjoys hanging out on the weekends with his daughter and wife and exploring the region. In fact, I saw a turtle on Craig Kickle Island just recently, which was a highlight. But I think the most relevant and interesting fact about Stuart is that he had a #1 app in the App Store. Now, if you know anything about apps, you know that that is super impressive. So it is our pleasure to welcome one of our Smart Hub members, Stuart Varrall, to talk to us today about chatbots. Thanks, Stuart.
Thank you very much for an introduction. Thanks all for coming today. I hope there's some valuable insights into chatbots for you. I'm going to cover a wide range of topics, everything from the very beginning through to what it means to build an enterprise chatbot. So hopefully there's something in there for everybody. So we're looking at what a chatbot is initially, how can you make one, and the process to go through when making a chatbot, and why do they go wrong, and maybe some tips for you if you're actually interacting with chatbots that might help. We're actually going to try and make a bot in this session, and so yeah, wish me luck for that one. It's always interesting. And then look at enterprise at the end of the session itself. As Elise said, I moved to Australia 2 years ago. I've been working for a company called Servian, who are Australia's largest data consultancy in Australia, and we've been working with clients on their chatbot solutions, such as Australian Super and QGC. So some large clients, plus quite a few more that I can't talk about, but these are the most relevant ones to this session. So let's start from the beginning. What is a chatbot? And very simply, a chatbot is something that takes the user inputs, does something with it, and then gives a response. And that can be on any medium, in any format. That can be voice, text, regardless. It takes a message and gives you some information in return. That information can be very simple or it could be very complicated. So you're probably already using bots. You may have seen them on websites as a pop-up. How can we help you? And quite often those websites are powered by bots before you get to a live agent. If you've used Facebook messaging or Slack or any of those messaging services, there's plenty of bots built into those services you can use. Even if you've been on the phone and you press 1 to this, press 2 to that, that is a very simple form of a chatbot. It's taking an input and giving a response. And through to services like Alexa, Siri. These are all forms of bots. Some of them are a lot more complicated than others, but they're all different types of bots that are out there in the wild. And why are they important? Well, there's an ever-increasing number of people are communicating on the go, and they're communicating via messaging. And so what this means is there's a need for people to continue that process, and they are familiar with that form of interaction, and they want to continue that form of interaction with businesses. Yet businesses are still far behind. There's still phone numbers to ring, there's still emails to send, whereas everyone is wanting information there and then, immediately, and they want access to their information on the go. And you may not agree with everything he says, but even Mark Zuckerberg agrees that messaging is now more popular and more important than the social network itself. So that's where chatbots, why they're important. And so who needs a bot? Why are they interesting? Why are they useful? If you're a business, an individual who's fielding regular questions, if you're getting repetition from customers time and time again, then a bot can be that initial interface with the customer and alleviate some of that load on your staff. Also for ordering systems, anything that the customer is doing repetitively or that can be designed into a nice structure or a nice flow, a bot can handle that flow for you and take the customer through that. The same for collecting information. If there's a form that's being filled in, if your members of staff or customers are filling out something regularly, then a bot can actually handle that process. And so maybe your staff are doing things where they need their hands to be interacting with something or doing something. You can use the voice of a bot to collect information and communicate with the person, and that's what we did with QGC. So when a well inspector is hands-on inside a well and inspecting the equipment, they don't have their hands to write down notes or to take notes on information that they're collecting, and so they control everything via voice, and that's another version of what a chatbot can do. And so that can extend for internal procedures and, as I mentioned before, social presence. So if you've got a Facebook presence, if you've got a Twitter presence, you're receiving inbound marketing from people on that platform, then you can use a bot to be that initial interface. And that's really important for out-of-hour support. If you're running a global business and you have people contacting you all night, or all day and night, and you're not able to respond to those, then they may go elsewhere. And a bot can be that initial interaction with your customers. So I may have given you a bit of a simplistic view of what a bot is, because what we're actually looking at is more like this. And suddenly you think, oh my word, this is getting too complicated already. I can't possibly get involved in this bot business. But luckily there are systems and services that take control of most of the complicated things for us. And what we're going to look at today is a program called Dialogflow, which is produced by Google, and that handles a lot of these complicated machine learning models, handling the text, the input, processing that for us, so we can actually concentrate on building the experience for the user itself. And so that just leaves us with the three areas that we need to concentrate on. And what's the inputs? So that is the types of things that we're looking out for from the user. What are they going to be asking us? And then what are we going to be responding to them with? And they're the main areas that we need to actually control. And then the area what the user asks. So that's how the user is actually interacting with the bots. How are they putting the information in and how they're getting back out again. So just looking in a bit more detail again, diving down into some of the complicated things, which luckily we don't need to necessarily care about, but it's good to have that knowledge of what's actually going on in the background of bots, because that helps us when we're looking at the design and the implementation of it. And so when we're looking up, if someone says a sentence, then we are able to do all this processing very quickly and very easily. And what we're expecting our bot system to do is to do all of this kind of thing for us. So in very simple terms, it will take a sentence and extract that into different areas of the sentence and be able to assign meaning and gain information about what the user is actually asking. And so what that means is we don't have to input sentences for every single thing that a user can ask. We need to give the bot some examples of things it might ask, and then the machine learning algorithms can do their clever things in the background to process the sentences in a way that we can infer what the user is meaning without having to specify exactly every single phrase that they may possibly ask. So why do chatbots go wrong, and what kind of things do we need to be aware of while we're interacting with bots or when we're producing bots? So let's say we're running a shop and we want a bot to respond to a user about opening times. So we may come up with two different areas. So what our opening times and when we're open. As a human, we can understand those, and they're two very different things. But when we start thinking about the kind of sentences or questions that people might ask to get this information, and we might come up with these. And these are all very similar in terms of the breaking down of a sentence. They all contain very similar words, they're all similar lengths, and as a human you can probably very easily identify which of those two areas we want to do, but as a bot you can see how these can be quite complicated to split up, because effectively what the bot is doing is assigning a number or a value to these sentences, and what we find with something like this is all of these sentences all group together very specifically, and so it doesn't know which one of those two pieces of information to respond to the user with. Now with this, it doesn't matter too much, but if there's something in terms of some financial information that you're giving to a user or something that's really important, if you've got things that are too similar, you end up with a bot that just looks stupid. And so what we need to do is, when we're thinking about these things, is to try and separate off the information we're giving. So what we suggest in this case is just to group those two together. And so all the responses will give the full opening times, and that just makes the life of the bot a lot easier, makes your life a lot easier, and gives the information that the customer needs. And one of the main things you have to think about is bot does not equal intelligence. Bots themselves are not intelligent things. They need to be programmed, they need to be given lots of training in order to build that seeming intelligence. And so we can't just assume, oh, I've got a bot, it must be intelligent. It really isn't the case, and we'll see some examples of that. And so some of the things that can go wrong with a bot is, one of the main ones is there's no fallback option. If a customer is interacting with a bot and it's just not giving the information they need, where do they go? The customer will very quickly get frustrated if they don't get the information they need. And so what we recommend is a very quick fallback to a human or a live person, someone who can answer that interaction. Because otherwise the customer's just going to go elsewhere very quickly. And the user asked the wrong thing, and the user asked something in the wrong way. And these, they're putting the blame on the user, but they're more in terms of how we're expecting the user to input information. So one of the things we see quite regularly, the bot might say, how can I help? So, my name is Stuart Varrall, my account number is blah, 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 I registered with you, blah, 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 and the problem I've got is X. And what they actually want is the problem I've got is X, but as a bot, it has to process this whole paragraph of information that the user has input, and it just can't do that. And so the bot needs to be able to pass the information, or at least prompt the user the customer to give it information that it can understand. And so that's one of the things we'll do when we build the bot later. And the other side of things, too many intents. So an intent is a phrase that the bot is looking for. So you can have too many of those, and you can have too few of those. So if you have too many, there's information all over the place, and it's the bot trying to do too much is as bad as the bot not being able to do enough. And so you need to get that balance right of what is it that the bot's trying to do, and not try and give it too broader information to do, but also not give it too narrow sort of things. And personality is a big thing. What's the personality of your business? How do you want this bot to interact? Is it going to be friendly, jolly, crack jokes, just be generally a friendly interaction, or is it just going to be very prompt and just give the information? And that's something that, as a brand, you need to decide. Where does the bot fit within that side of things? Is it an extension of our business? It needs to feel like it's the information is coming from your business or from one of your staff within the business. And the other side is no access to information. So a lot of customers will want information about themselves or about their accounts or about something that they've done, an order that they've put in, that they've made. And so you need to give that information to be able to have access to the information to the user, so that you're able to give them the information that they're asking for. And then something that we use as a broad formula when we're looking at not just bots, but AI in general when we're working. The automation is the bit that tends people focus on, but you also have to think about the user experience and what the innovation is you're bringing to the party, to give that business value. The automation in itself isn't usually enough to drive any value for the business. So if we're designing a chatbot, what kind of things do we need to think about? Mainly is, what is the purpose of the bot? What's it actually trying to achieve, and what are the outcomes you're looking for? Is it you're trying to reduce the strain on the call center? Is it you're trying to allow someone to place an order? What is that main goal? It's very easy when you start thinking about chatbots just to start putting jokes in there, answering questions, random things. What you actually need to think about is what the actual purpose of this bot is. It's another tool for your business. What is it trying to achieve for the customer or achieve for your internal staff? And then what context is the user in? Are they going to be accessing this on their phone on the go? Are they going to be sat at the computer? Are they going to be using their voice to interact with it? And that has a big impact in the types of information you're able to provide and then how you interact with that user. Also, who's driving the conversation? Is this something that you're trying to extract information from the customer, or is it the customer trying to extract information from you? And again, it has big implications about how complicated you need to make things, but also the types of information that you're able to provide. And just generally how the user and the bot will communicate. What medium is that? Is it through an app? Is it through the website? Is it through a phone call? How does that work? It can be all of those things, but you need to think about these from the start. And so these are the types of interactions that you can provides, amongst others, and each of those has different implications about how easy it is for the customer to give you the information, but then also how easy it is for you to give the information back to the customer. We spoke about the scope of the bot, how wide this is. It's usually best to focus on a narrow segment to start with and make sure it's really good at answering questions in that field before stepping out. And one of the problems we see often is people try and do too much with it at once, and then you end up with a situation where it can't answer the basic questions. It's trying to be too broad. And thinking about where the information is coming from. As I said, the bot in itself isn't intelligent. One of the common things people think of a bot is, I need to be able to book rooms in my organisation, because booking meeting rooms is really difficult. But the bot needs to know, what rooms are open, when they're available, how to book them, all those different aspects. It's not an intelligent being in itself. All that information still needs to be collected, all that integration still needs to happen. And so you really need to think about that before you start putting the information out there. And then again, what's the fallback? If things go wrong, how does it escalate? Where does the user go? Or where does the member of staff go from there? How can we provide the information they're asking for in a way that's the experience of the bots leads them somewhere rather than it's just the endpoints where they get frustrated and give. So now we're going to go and try and build a bot ourselves. So we haven't got long, but we'll give it a good go. Some of the things that we need to know throughout this process: agents is the bot itself, example of the bot. Intents are types of things that users say, the phrases that they are giving, and then how the bot responds to that is the responses to those intents. Entities are parts of the sentence, so that might be a thing, a being, a time, and those are things that we can extract from what the user says in order to make the bot more intelligent. And then contexts are landmarks in the conversation. Where in the conversation are we? Are we talking about insurance, or are we talking about cars? If those two different areas, we can lead the customer or the person down particular routes, and that's we use context to do that. So I'll switch over to a live demo now. Okay, this is the Dialogflow service that I spoke about. So this is provided by Google, and all I've done here is started a new agent. So we will call it Lunch and Learn. Leave everything else as it is.
So is this available? Is there a charge? How do people get onto this, Stuart?
Yes, so this is a free service to begin with, and they charge depending on the usage. We have some enterprise clients who are still on the free tier of the Dialogflow. So in terms of what you get for free, it's very generous. And so what you're able to do is sign up for free using a Google account. I mean, you can get access to this just as I'm showing you here. I haven't got any special rights. I'm not paying anything to get access to this service here.
So literally Google Dialogflow, and then click on the website and then just
sign up.
Sign in, sign up, and agree, and off you go.
Yep.
Then that's the first screen that you'll see.
That's when you say like new agents or new bots. That's
cool. And when it says agent, that means that is what bot you want to build.
yeah.
Perfect. Cool.
So when you create a new bot, it creates two things for you: a welcome intent and a fallback intent. So maybe back up a step. The bot we're going to try and build today is for the Cap Cornea region. So we're going to do a tourist information bot, or at least the first part of the tourist information bot. So we're going to try and answer some questions about what to do in the region. So these are the phrases that are automatically created for us. So when the user says one of these things, then the bot will be able to respond. And these are called training phrases. And so what we need to do is try and capture the types of things that a user will say, and the system in the background will infer other phrases and other words that are similar to this for us. So we don't have to be exhaustive in this. The more phrases we can give, then the better it's going to be at categorizing them. But you don't need to give hundreds of phrases just to say hi. So there's a few it gives you as examples, but what it tends to do is then build upon that, so it will extrapolate from that basis. And then down here we have the responses, and so we'll remove that response, and this is what the bot will say when we respond. So I will just okay. So I've just got a welcome phrase here, welcome to the bot, and we'll train it on a few different phrases. And we ask the question initially. So how long are you visiting for?
Can I just ask a question? So where did you pull that phrase from? You could have just typed that in, right?
Yeah,
so this is just another document that you prepared earlier.
I've just prepared that earlier, so you had to sit here and watch me make typing mistakes the whole time.
So you could have said anything. You could have said, hey, how are you?
Absolutely.
Welcome to Capricornian, whatever. You put in your welcome.
Absolutely, that's
your
what the response will be, and that can be absolutely anything.
So Stuart, if you have a Google's default response, and you create your own response, which one does Google normally default to as a
So you can see here there's a list of different responses, and so it will pick one of those. And so you can have multiple responses to the same question. So usually that's a good way to make the bot sound more natural. So when the user says hello, it'll say something slightly different each time, but it will just pick one of those at random for each response. So we've added that in here, and there's a little box up here which says try it now. So if we just say hey, we should see the response that we just typed in. It's very simple. So what we need to do now is create an intent which we can use to say how long we're in the region for. So if we just say, and we will add some training phrases in here. So this is what the user will respond with. So the types of things the user may respond with: 7 days, holiday for a week, visiting for a month. You can see already the Dialogflow system is helping us out here. So what it's automatically done is recognize that the things we're saying here are durations of time. So it's automatically picking up that a month is a duration, a week is a duration, and the number of days is a duration. So we don't have to do that. We can help it out if it hasn't, but it's automatically picked those things up for us. And what we need to do is, as the bot, is to respond to that. So if someone says I'm here for 7 days, we can say, so that will be, the duration is what the user has actually said. So when someone types in, so this will pigeon the response back to, parrot the response back to the user. So that's great. And what do you want to do? What do you want to do whilst you're here?
So is that a $ duration? Is that the term that you'll use to replicate what was said before?
You can see here it's picked up the duration, which is highlighted in yellow, and it's telling you what the value is. So if you need to use that value for something, it's there, it's available. And so what we can do now is activate this web demo under the integrations, and this will give us a demonstration of what this bot will look like if it was on a website. So immediately we can see an input form here, so we can say good day. So good day isn't actually one of the welcome phrases that Google has, but it knows that's similar enough to hello, hi. It knows that that's what you're saying. So it's saying how long we're visiting for. Here for a month. So we didn't actually put in the phrase I'm here for the time, but again it can infer that from what we're doing.
So if you went back one step, would you have chosen whether to have voice or text at that point?
Yes, so at the moment we're just going to do everything via the text because that's easier to do in a demonstration, but you can quite easily either input or output using voice. And so this same system, effectively with a click of a button, can be used voice or text, and the same responses both.
And is that option available under the free initial trial?
Yeah.
And will you show us where to activate voice?
So voice is technically activated by default. It requires this Google Assistant integration. And so there's a few steps you need to do to actually activate that. So I won't be able to do that
today. Okay.
But it is available, but just by default. So again, it's a Google service, so and that's handy that they've got both of those.
Can you delay the response from the bots to make it seem more natural?
Yeah, so there's various options. So I'll go into it in a bit, but you can effectively program it to do anything you like. So you can respond to one thing, you can respond to 10 things, and that's all. Yeah, again, all optional. So one of the things, I did it in this introduction. Yeah, so you can see here when we introduce ourselves, we specifically say we're a bot. And that's something that we find is really valuable when people are interacting with the service. You're not trying to pretend to be a human. And people can pick on it quite quickly that they're not interacting with a human. And so we're very explicit about we're a bot. I can help you with certain things, but not other things. And that helps frame the conversation with people as to how they can interact with the system.
But Stuart, can you delay the response? You know how when you're chatting to your friend, it shows that he's typing and the response doesn't come back instantly or instantaneously. Is it possible to delay the bot's response?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it's specifically a bot, we don't actually recommend doing that because one of the benefits of being a bot is the information is there instantly. You haven't got to wait for someone to type it out. But there is some delay if you're looking up information from an external service. There'll be a natural delay. But yeah, you can do things. You could actually have it type out the phrases as you're going if you wanted to. But it's, from a user perspective, they want the information there and then, ideally.
Do most people know what a bot is though? Like, hey, I'm a bot. Like, until now, I never know what it was. We had this conversation in the kitchen. I'm a bot. I'm going to go, what's that?
Yeah, absolutely. So again.
Everyone except what's a bot?
Yeah, so that's one of the areas that is usually one of the first things to program is who are you, what are you, where do you live? Those kind of questions that people will naturally they're interested. What is behind the system, and so you can phrase those. And again, that's part of the company and the type of experience you want to give. How friendly. Whether it's a joke-telling bot or whether it's very down matter of fact, I'm an artificial system providing you with responses, or my name's Joan, I'm here to help you, blah blah blah. So there's two very different areas that you can go down.
I might be jumping ahead because you don't have to answer, but I'm just wondering, can you apply this, say, to something already in an app that you're using, or to your Facebook page, or to your website?
Yeah.
How do people easily access it?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we go to the integrations tab here, you can see the types of different integrations that Dialogflow provide by default. And so there are things like Facebook Messenger, there are Twitter interactions, Alexa integration. So those are all provided as a default. And then it's also possible to integrate into any of your own systems as well. And just requires a bit more effort. But yeah, the same way that this integrates with the websites, in this system, you can then do that within an app or within the site. And that's what we've done for Australia Super. They have their app, which has the bot integrated into that. And then we have the website with the bot there as well. And it's the same information is powering both interactions. Just providing it to a different way for the users to do. So you can see within a few minutes, we've already got a system where the user can converse with the bot. It's very easy to do that. So we're going to try and add a bit more information. So one of the things we asked there is, what do you want to do in the region? Something I quite like doing is drinking coffee. So we'll add a coffee intent, and the user is going to say things like, I love coffee. Does anyone have a favourite coffee shop in Rockhampton or the region?
Lighthouse,
So the response we can give, I love the boathouse. Anyone else?
Brisbane Tigers.
So here we've given a couple of different responses for that question. But what we want to be able to do is to continue that conversation quite naturally. So what we need to do is add what's called a follow-up intent, and that's as easy as adding one to the copy intent that we've just created. And so the copy will be listening out for things like, I like coffee, any good coffee shops. We will then respond with those two that we've just put in, and then the user might respond with one of these type questions. And so they might also say thanks. Sounds good. And then thinking about what the bot might say. No problem. Is there anything else we can help you with?
So you could, for example, you could say I can send you a link to the map or something like that.
Yeah. So we'll do one of those in a minute.
Yeah.
So if we then go back to this page here and reload, we can start the conversation again. What do you want to do while you're here? I like coffee. And immediately it's given us a response, so I can say thanks. And so we've got a very simple conversation going already, and very simply. The problem at the moment is if I say something like, I like pizza, it doesn't actually know what we mean because we haven't actually programmed anything in for that. So there's something called a fallback intent, which can help us in that situation. And this is, a fallback intent is, if the bot doesn't know what you're talking about, it doesn't understand the phrase that you've entered, it will then respond with this. And so we can use this to prompt the user or to try and get them back on track with what the bot can actually do. So by default, Google has a set of responses basically saying, sorry, I don't understand. But we're going to be a bit more specific with what we're responding with. And again, I'm just going to paste something in here somewhere. There we go. So we're just going to say a simple phrase. So I'm in training, so can't cover everything that we're doing, but I can help with these three topics, and these are the three that we're going to be doing today. And so next time we say something random it doesn't understand, it will then give us a response to try and get us back on track as a user to things that we can actually help with. And so we've already identified a couple of great coffee shops. Next thing we want to do is maybe suggest some adventure topics, adventure activities to do in the region. So we'll create a new intent. And the user might say things like, what I like doing, I like being active, getting out and about, adventure holidays, those type of questions. So we're trying to think of the types of things that someone might type in, and what you'll find is you might have some good ideas about what users might be asking, but then when these actually get used, you'll find there's a whole load of more things that you never even thought about. So one of the things you have to do when producing a bot is to keep an eye on the types of questions that people are asking and see whether you are responding in the right way. And I'll show you how we can do that very simply. So these are a few phrases that someone might use, and then I've got a few responses that I thought might be useful. So here we're going to, again, suggest a few different things that the user might be able to do. And in this instance, we might suggest something that the user doesn't want to do. So we'll have what's called a fallback intent with a no or a negative response. And again, this is pre-populated with some of those negative things that the user might say. And then we'll respond with again, prompting the user to do something. So as a bot, we're always trying to, in this situation anyway, we're always trying to extract information from the user. So we're always trying to leave things with a question. Otherwise, you're leaving people without knowing where they are or what they're supposed to do next. And so we start this again, and we can jump straight to adventure. We can then say no, or we can then go back to the drinking coffee. So we can we're starting to create a structured conversation where we can jump around between the different things quite easily. But what we can see now is we can let the bot suggest different things, but we're not able to actually know what we've suggested using this interface. And this is one of the limitations where you start coming up with limitations as to what dialogue can do for you automatically. And so we can have a series of responses, but we don't know what we responded to the user with, so we can't carry on that conversation easily in this form. What we can do is, so if someone says adventure, we can suggest one thing, and if they say no, we can suggest another thing, and no, another thing, and no, another thing. So we can create a very complicated branch structure, but that can quite quickly get out of control if you've got lots of different areas that you're trying to do that with. And so you end up with a situation where you can losing people, or you're losing yourself within this framework. So what we can do is start adding a bit of intelligence to the bot itself, and we do that with something called fulfillment. So this is where it gets a bit more complicated, but fulfillment is essentially a way of controlling what the bot is doing through scripting. So we can listen for what people are saying and then respond programmatically. And by doing that programmatically, it means that we have more control about what's happening within the conversation, and we can get more intelligent with how we're doing things. So I've got a script based in here. And I won't go into this in too much detail, but what we're effectively doing is we've got a set of historical or cultural activities that we're providing. And so we, in much the same way that we had a response to the activities about what we want to do, we've got the same for the cultural side of things, but we've just written those down in the script instead. And then because we know that we've responded with a generic or the gallery response, if someone says that's great or yes please, then we can then give them a bit more specific information about that activity. So things like how to get there, going to the website, or any information you want to respond to about that specific topic. So we can deploy that, and this takes a little bit longer to
Stuart, just to take it back 1 second, what happens with unanswered questions? If the bot doesn't have an answer, what happens with those questions?
So that still goes back to the fallback intent that we done earlier. So the good thing about this system is this can be used in a very specific part of the bot. So if you need to look up information about the user's accounts, that can be handled using the scripting service, but you can still have all the other intents that you've already got with the other side of things. So we haven't overwritten anything we've already done. We're just amending that sort of things. And so what I'm just going to do now is I've got a history, cultural intents that I set up earlier, so I don't want to sit there and type those out. And so I'll just import those quickly here. But they're not doing anything that we haven't seen before. it's just adding a set of historical things in there.
So all you're doing is you're just not typing now, you're just importing. So it's something you prepared earlier.
Exactly.
Cool.
And so you can see every time we do something and make a change, the bot does its thing. And sometimes with that change is just a change in the sentence that can be done in a second. And other times, like when we're deploying a script or we're importing something, that takes a bit longer. And this is doing a vast amount of calculations in the background. And these are all the things that I said that Dialogflow handles for us. Just taking all those intents, all those phrases, extrapolating them, and adding the additional types of phrases that people might want to do. But that's all done in seconds because Google is handling all that for us on their vast machines and resources they have available. So that makes it really handy. So we just start from the beginning now, and hopefully this will all work. So if I now say cultural activities, so it will now give us an example. So this is one of the things that we had in that script. And if I don't want to do that, it will now give us something else within that list. But because we programmed this, it will give us a different answer to what we've already got. And so it will go through those, picking out a random one, but it knows that it's given us that answer now. So I can say, that sounds great, and then it can give us more information about that specific thing that it's given us. And so, again, what we were able to do very quickly is to add some complexity to our bots, but we need to program that side of things in. And it is actually possible to replicate this, as I say, within this intent framework here. It just can get very complicated if you're starting to do branching out into vast areas. And so hopefully that was a very quick introduction as to the power you get from bots and how quickly you can see we can build up this type of information. So we'll just switch back to the slides.
So in the analytics part, would you kind of go and search for how many people have asked this type of question, or?
Absolutely. So
there was
by default,
questions that could be answered by the bot.
Yeah, so by default we get a list here of all the different conversations that we've had, and so we can see the types of things that we've already entered. So say I said cheese and it didn't match anything. And you can see the conversations as they go down. So you can monitor this to see what things people are asking for and how that's being matched. And then you can also go in and say, actually that's not what I intended. If someone says coffee and it's taken them to the adventure side of things, you can then say that's what I intended. You can see how they phrased it and then retrain the bot with that information.
Is there any way we can look inside and see the program behind it?
Unfortunately not, so that's Google's secret sauce. So that's the kind of things they keep under wraps. But in terms of the types of things it's doing, the way I showed you that graph and how it's mapping the information, that's the types of things it's doing behind the scenes, as well as a lot more than that. But as I say, it's actually quite lucky that they do extrapolate a lot of that for us because it's very complicated otherwise.
So Stuart, essentially, if you have a Facebook page or you have a website for your business, you can add a bot, and that will, in theory, or what's your experience? Does it then prompt more engagement? Does it let users stay on your page longer? Does it lead to leads and sales? Like, what's the actual real benefit from a business owner's perspective to have a go and incorporate a bot?
The main thing is freeing up time. And
Yep.
so, especially for small businesses, if you are answering all those inbound inquiries, or you're not able to answer all those inbound inquiries and people are going elsewhere because you don't have the time to do that, you're freeing up the agent's resources to do that. So that's one of the big things that we see. But yes, in terms of what the goals are for the bot, it's the same with any type of business investment. What are you trying to do? Is it increasing sales? Then you can target it very specifically for that side of things.
But it will increase engagement overall.
Exactly.
Yeah, excellent.
So this is the framework of the thing that we just built in terms of the bot demo. And you see it can get quite complicated quite quickly. And what you always have to have in mind is this type of map as to what things are connecting to where the user is within the conversation and how they get to somewhere else within the conversation. And this is all in the design of the actual bot itself. So that's a very quick demo, but now what would you need to do to actually get this live? And the main thing would be to expanding on those initial topics. We only answered three very specific areas, but obviously we want to be a lot more expansive and provide a lot more information. And that information can come from your existing analytics, it might come from your existing call center agents. You all know as a business the types of inquiries that you get on a regular basis and the types of areas that would benefit from the bot. And that's one of the things we do when we look at enterprise and this side of things is we'll sit down with the business for up to a week to actually analyse what's going on, where can the bot actually help, is a bot even useful, what areas will it best serve, and usually the business knows that type of information themselves. And then there's lots of testing involved. You can spend as long as you like creating all these phrases, but as soon as you give it to a customer, you will find that they will ask something else. And so you need to test it quite extensively with a subset or with your audience and monitor that and see exactly what kind of questions they're asking and make sure that you are responding to those areas. As we mentioned, the integration of different platforms, you can integrate this into vast amounts of different platforms, your websites, your app, and messaging platforms, and you need to think about where your customers are currently engaging with you or where you want them to engage with you and target those areas. So the three main things that you need to think about when designing or thinking about a bot is the purpose. What are you trying to achieve? Is it sales? Is it gathering more information or more accurate information from your customer or from your internal staff? The context, are people using this on their phone? Do they have time? Are they just asking for things via their voice? All those different things can have big implications about how much information you're able to provide and how you're able to provide that information. And then the conversation design. You can't do this after the fact. You need to have a real understanding about the types of conversation that the user is going to have with the bot and how you lead the user down the right way and the conversation that you want to have. Ultimately, the bot is in control of that interaction, and so it needs to lead the customer or the user in the right direction. And that needs to be thought about up front. That's not something you can just add in at the end. Otherwise, you can get into lots of trouble. So that's what you would do for getting a very basic and simple bot. But what about an enterprise? A business that needs auditing, that needs multiple people editing the system at once. And they can use the Dialogflow interface as we've just seen, but unfortunately it lacks a number of different things. And so we can't automate much of the process using that web interface, and we can't keep a track of versioning or deployment. So as I mentioned, every time we type something into the interface, it's automatically retraining and redeploying the bot. So you might make a change to the coffee intent, which you think is quite mundane, but actually that could have a huge implication about another intent over here. So without having that understanding, without being able to test the changes that you're making and keep a track of those, then you're not able to deploy that into an enterprise environment, especially when things like financial information or auditing is required. And we need to have that system. And so that's where we've developed a much more complicated system that sits on top of what we're already doing. So rather than just having one bot, we end up splitting that into 3 different environments. The same as where you would do if you're building a website or an application. You have an area that you can test and play around in things. You have another area that you can develop on actively and make changes without breaking anything. And then the final area, which is the production, which is what the customer actually sees. And all of this other services are built around the Dialogflow interface. And it doesn't have to be Dialogflow. There are other services available that you can use as well. But that's just the one that we find has been the most accurate and the most productive for the types of things that we're doing. And then you've got the wider bot integration. So in terms of the Dialogflow side of things, that can fit in here. This is all the areas that we provide as an enterprise system on top of that service. But then if you've got call center agents who are interacting with customers via voice or via text, we can integrate that system into the process. So when a call center agent finally gets the customer communication directly, they will then have a log of every interaction that has been said within that long conversation, so that the agent can just pick up where the bot has gone on. And the bot agents can also see conversations that are currently ongoing with bots, so they can jump in at any time if they can see that the conversation is going south. And all those areas add engagement. So what we find with the call center agents with Australian Seat, for example, is they're a lot freer to be able to spend their time with customers who actually need their time. You know, they're relieved from the sort of mundane, repetitive questions that they get asked, and they're able to spend quality time with the customers who actually need a human to answer their questions. So you can see it gets quite complicated quite quickly, but also it's accessible that you can go in and start doing it yourself without having to get to this level of integration. But again, it's not too complicated. So generally what we find is a month is a good time frame for the initial interaction through to actually having a bot that is releasable and people to start testing and using. And so all of that, because we have a service that wraps around all the complicated side of things, even within a month we can have something that's up and running. And I think we're bang on time. So that's everything I had today. I'm happy to hang around and ask questions.
Can we ask questions? So who has a question? I'm sure we have questions. Everyone, yes, Nav.
Can you tell us about using bots in a sales situation? So have you ever come across something like that? Maybe converting to a phone call?
Yeah, so I haven't done that specifically, but there are plenty of bots which do that. So, for example, ordering a pizza, you can do that fully via a bot, or lots of clothing companies are getting into that sales of things. So rather than have someone going to a website and saying, what kind of things have you got, or looking for a dress in this size, the bot can actually do that initial interaction and do that sales or that engagement side of things up front.
With the, I've got a bot for my business, design mobile market. Can you export that data into Dialogflow?
Yeah, so there are lots of ways of extracting existing information into other systems. So Dialogflow is a big one. IBM have Watson, which is their version of the bot. And yeah, there's ways of, as you saw me import the intents, the historic, the culture side of things into there. You can do the same thing with exporting from a completely different bot and importing into new services. But sometimes that's very straightforward. Other times, if there's some custom side of things, that can be a bit longer.
And then the fallback intent where you were, the fulfillment where you were programming. What sort of programming language is it? Like sort of PHP sort of stuff, or is it?
Yeah, so that was done in JavaScript, and that's the default. But actually, you can do that in any language you like. So they will give you the information about what has been asked, what the users asked, what context they're in, the conversation, and then you can decide how to respond to that. So Google have libraries in all the different languages that you can use. This is very flexible when it gets to that stage.
Do you have to have somebody in the call center to be able to watch it, or is it just something like that on your own? Can we get it to our mobile phones, or how does that work?
Yes, you don't have to be watching the conversations if you don't want to be. That's it'll all happen automatically in the background. So you can just check in on a weekly basis and just see the types of things that are happening. And again, it depends on what the output of the bot is supposed to be. So it might just be a case of you need to speak to someone. Here's a number to ring, and the customer will be able to pick up that conversation there and then. Or you can get it to export a log of the conversation and send that to your email. So you have a record of everything that's been said, and through to sort of very custom dashboards, you can see what hours of the day people are interacting with the bots and the types of questions they're asking, and whether this interaction was successful or not. Those types of information you can all build based on the output of the information.
Can you build at the end of the conversation with a full stop button? Can you put in a referral to call? Call buttons in there and use call.
Yeah, so one of the integrations we've built with Australian Super is actually a connect to agent system. So via their voice bots that we've built, it will ask, we can't handle that, would you like us to connect you to an agent? Yes, please. And say, what's your telephone number? You give it your number, it automatically calls the call center, calls you, and connects the two things together. So as a customer, they don't have to do
if that goes to a central area, you've got branches all around Australia, and you take it to the local branch.
You can have it there, yeah. So you can know where the user is interacting from, or you can ask the user which area you're in, and it can do that.
Who's thinking about having a go, integrating a bot? Yeah. I think customers expect instant responses. I really think they do, and we don't want to be working 24/7, so this is a really good thing in that regard. Yeah. Any other questions?
So I'm a member of the Smart Hub, so if anyone needs more information or wants more information, then I'm happy to help out.
How long will you be able?
Yeah, Smart Hub member. I have one question just before we wrap up. So if you're not technically minded, can you still go and have a go, and will you be able to get a bot up?
Yeah, so as you've seen from what we're doing, it's mainly about what kind of questions people are asking and what kind of responses. And as long as you're willing to go through that process of pulling out the information that you need to respond to customers, there's nothing more than typing that you need to do.
Excellent. So it's more about understanding what your customers want and how to respond than it is about using the programming or the technical platform.
Absolutely. You can get a very long way without getting to that programming step. Just wanted to show what you can do.
What's possible.
Yeah, when you start getting beyond that.
Excellent.
There's another question I had. Sorry, but what's the app that hit number one installed?
There's a game called Canny Crazy.
Canny Crazy.
It's not available anymore.
That is super impressive. I have to say, that is impressive. Let me grab a bit. Stuart, Varrall, one of our very valued Smart Hub members, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for preparing this talk, and we hope to come back and give us some more information later about